Hi, in this MuseumIndex Plus video we're going to take a quick look at some of the location control, location update facilities within MuseumIndex Plus. One thing I'll just show you very quickly before I really get into it is that I just want to open the context panel over here on the left and look at the list of procedures. There is a formal location and movement control procedure from Spectrum. And we could put workflow on that, and the use of procedures and the use of workflow has been covered in other videos. I'll just show you what's in a location and movement control procedure. This is really to do with the planning and management of, I suppose, a big gallery move or something like that, for example, where you need to record contact details of people involved in the movement, how the objects were moved, notes, and where you're planning on sort of dates, and you need to have things like approval for the move and these kind of things. I'm not really going to go into this today. What I want to focus on is actually just updating the location of the objects, the way the location of an object is controlled within the system. So we'll close that. So what I'll do, I'll start by just finding some records. Let's do a search, and let's have a look at what I'll do is we'll find some records that have got some images because they always look better. And I'm going to start off by just looking at some single part records. We've covered the idea of wholes and parts in another video as well. So here we've got 43 objects. And you can see in this summary listing down here, as well as the collection code and museum number, descriptive information, we have the current location. So what I'll do, I'll just start by editing one record. So the location is at the part level. Every part can have its own location. So if I edit this record, go down to the location fields. The location is managed as a block of fields. When I hit the change button, it does a couple of things for me. It fills in today's date and the username that I've logged in as. I can still change those if I'm updating the system on behalf of a movement carried out by somebody else. But what I wanted to show you was just the way that a location is recorded. So this is one of the things that we would expect to customize for each customer of ours, because different museums record their locations differently. But this is a fairly typical arrangement where you have a controlled location, and that will be some kind of drill down of your main locations within the museum. So in this case, this is a demonstration database, but we have a number of sites, and within each site we have a number of rooms. So I can set the control part of the location, the site and the room, just by picking one of these entries. And then in addition to the control part of the location, we then have free text fields for case, shelf and box. In theory, these could all be further levels within the controlled location thesaurus, but often these things are a little bit ad hoc and they tend to change a lot. So not all museums want to control their locations down to this level. But I can put anything in here, so I could say I want to move this object to location and room C4, case A, shelf 3, box 1. And then if I just save that change, what we'll see here, that's now the current location. The location that we display down here is a concatenation of all those components into a single string that shows the entire location. And the other thing I wanted to show is that whenever you change the location, the system automatically maintains a history. Looks like this object's actually moved around quite a lot. This was its previous location, and it was moved here by this user here on this date, and so on back in time. So we can see the entire history of this object's movements within the museum. If I'm an administrator, I can also delete entries in the history. Sometimes you update the location, you just put in the wrong value by mistake, and you might want to clean up the history a little bit. So that's how to update a single object's location. The next thing I'll show you is how we can update multiple objects at the same time. So let's just have a quick look and see what we've got. Suppose I wanted to move all of these cars. Let's just mark these, so I can right click on the first one, hold down Shift and right click on the last one, and that marks that range. And then what I can do is I can go record here and batch location update, and I get a pop-up. You can see this is the same set of fields when I was editing a single record. And again, I just pick change, pick my new location, so let's move all these to Site F, Room 1, Case 3, Shelf 1. Maybe there is no appropriate box. And I continue. I get an option. I can choose to update just the current record, the range, an arbitrary range of records. In my current search result of 43 records, or in this instance, the 5 records that I've marked. And when I run that, it just runs over those 5 records and updates their location. And if we look at the summary, you can see they've all now moved to their new location, and they've all had their history updated. The other thing I'll show you while we're on this screen is, let's just unmark those. We can also do an audit of locations, so this is really to do with checking that objects are in the location they claim to be and flagging up any that appear to be missing. So again, there's a facility on the record menu here called Location Audit. When I pick that, I get a summary listing, just changes the summary and basically gives me this toolbar here. So what I can do, I can mark the records individually, so I can look at each one and say, yes, that object is where it claims to be, so is that one, so is that one. I can step across those. I can mark a set of records. You see it then ticks that apply to batch. I can just tick that and say that all 4 of them have been seen in place and they're audited. And then the other thing I can do is, I might come to this object and discover that it's not in this location. It's not where it claims to be. So I can audit this record as being not in place. And that just audits it with a different status value here. And I carry on and say that one's seen, that one's seen, that one's seen. The purpose of that is so that subsequently you can do a very quick audit of the locations, and then you can revisit the records that are not in place, and ultimately you might end up having to create perhaps an exit record to describe that this object is missing, or it's been disposed of, or it's just been discovered in another location. So that's location auditing. We'll just finish that. So as well as being able to batch update objects in a single part, I just wanted to show you how it's how we deal when we're batch updating objects that are in multiple parts. So we'll go back to our search form, and I'm going to change the number of parts. So instead of 1 part, I'm going to find records that have 3 parts each. Let's just see what we've got. So we put a bunch of toys among other things, and if I look at one of these, the reason it's in 3 parts, you can see we've got the toy itself, and these are boxed, so we've also catalogued the lid of the box and the base of the box. I think that's probably true for each of these. There's a couple of things I wanted to show you there. Let's have a look at the Etch-a-Sketch. One thing that might happen is we might, for example, want to leave the box on display, but perhaps the Etch-a-Sketch itself needs to go to conservation for some reason. If it's damaged and it needs repair, but we'd quite like to leave the box where it is. So what we can do, we can switch to a part view of this object. I've covered holes and parts in more detail in another video where I've already shown this feature, but so what we're now looking at is the 3 separate parts of the object. This is the toy itself. This is the box, and this is the instructions, in fact. So what we'll do, we'll pick the toy, and I can just change its location. So again, we just go down here, we pick a new location. Let's suppose it's moved to, I don't know if I have conservation specifically in here, but let's say that Site P was my conservation department, room 1. I can just save that. And now if we look at this listing, we can see that the box and the instructions are in their original location, but the toy itself is moved. And if I go back to my object view, when we look at that record again, we can see here that the toy is now in one location, but the box and the instructions are still in their original location. So you can update the location of individual parts of an object. Now, the other thing we can do when we're looking at multi-part objects, remember each of these records that I'm looking at is a 3-part object. Let's mark a range of these. Let's suppose I'm going to move all of these. So I'll do what I did before, go to the record menu and pick batch location update. Let's change the location, and so what I'm going to do is move all of these objects to room F2, case 1, shelf B. And I want to move the marked records. Now, when I hit OK, what you'll notice on the screen is that it actually, you'll see it moving part 1, part 2, part 3 of each object, and then it'll go on to the next object and move part 1, part 2, part 3, and so on. So as I run that, it's moving, you can see there, it's running across all the parts of all the objects and moving them all to the new location. I'll probably illustrate that best if we look at just those marked records. So that's the set of records. If I now switch, so we look at the location there. If I switch to the part view of the current search result, you can see that all of my parts have been moved to that new location. If I didn't want to do that, if I wanted to do a batch update across this marked set of 3-part objects, but I didn't want to move all of the parts, then what I'd do at this point is I'd get just that set of records. I'd switch to the part view of the current search result. So now I'm looking at all my parts, and maybe I don't want to move. What's this? This is the box lid. I want to leave the box lid and the base of that object where it was, and I want to leave the lid and the base of that object where they are, but move everything else. So I just mark those, and then I can have a look at the unmarked records, and then again just run batch location update across those marked records and move all of those to room 3, case 1, shelf A, for example. And so now what I've done is I've moved all of those parts, apart from the few I marked. If I go back to the search result where they were marked, so this record, again, let's look in the summary listing, it's probably the easiest way to see that. So here you can see this record has moved, but the ones that I marked have stayed in their original location. And they all have a history of the previous movements. And I think that basically concludes this demonstration video of location update facilities within MuseumIndex Plus.